Good day and welcome to the League of Women Voters. Meet the Candidates Forum, a program produced in collaboration with WTJX-TV for well over 35 years. It is our hope that through these programs, you, the voting public, will have a better understanding of each candidate running for elective office in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We invite you to look at all our programs for the 2022 election year right here on WTJX-TV, with candidates seeking office as a senator in the 35th legislature, or as governor or as lieutenant governor. Although all candidates for these positions were invited, not all responded or accepted the invitation. We are delighted to have here today, however, 3 candidates running for the position of senator in the District of St. Croix. I am Annette Scott, and I will serve as the moderator for today's program. The candidates have been informed in advance of the guidelines of the program. No candidates had access to the questions in advance. The first responder to each question will be rotated among the participants. Answers are generally to 60 or 90 seconds with challenges and rebuttals of 60 seconds each. Changes in timing for a question will be announced in advance. Any comment directed specifically at another participant will be followed by a rebuttal of 60 seconds. All are expected to be respectful of everyone. So let's begin. I will ask each candidate to identify who they are and to state their political affiliation and ballot number. We will learn more about each as our discussion ensues. Let's start with Franklin Johnson. Candidate, please state your name, ballot number, and affiliation.
Good day to the Virgin Islanders. My name is Franklin D. Johnson. I'm number 9 on your ballot, independent candidate, número 9 en su papeleta.
Thank you so much. Shalima Edwards, candidate, please state your name, ballot number, and affiliation.
Uja, greetings. My name is Shalima Edwards. I am an independent, and my number is 8.
Thank you so much. Now, Javan James, candidate, please state your name, ballot number, and affiliation.
Greetings to the people of the U.S. Virgin Islands. My name is Senator Javan E. James Sr., and I'm number 18 on the ballot, and I'm running under the Democratic banner. Thank you.
Thank you. Now for our first questions. Let's begin by talking about your readiness to be a senator. Here is a 2-part question for which you will each have 90 seconds to answer. As a candidate for a seat in the Virgin Islands legislature, what are your competencies as well as education or training that will make you a good choice to address our issues as a senator? And what are your recent accomplishments that show your skills and readiness to assume the responsibilities of the office? So please answer both parts of the question in 90 seconds. What are your competencies and your accomplishments related to the responsibilities of the position? You have 90 seconds. Mr. Johnson.
Good day. Thank you very much for that question. I've been servant to the people of this territory for quite some time. I started in the Bureau of Correction, went down to work in Government House, where I learned a lot about the government and its processes, and then managed to be successful in my first bid. I've had a very difficult time in the legislature moving my measures through, but I've worked with everyone. I've worked with all my colleagues, regardless of party affiliation. I've been blessed to be on the subcommittee for finance, and was blessed to be a part of one of those serving and making sure that we saved the GRS. So that accomplishment for me was something big and really challenging, because when I campaign on that. I campaign on the youths. I've signed on to legislation with many of my colleagues that represent the youths of this territory, and I'm still willing to fight for the youths of the territory and the seniors in our territory. So I must say that I've been a civil servant and will continue to be that. I'm a person that anyone can reach at any time. I'm one of few candidates that's in the Senate. My business card have my personal cell phone. I'm a person that touch and believe in dealing with the people right on one-on-one. I have an open door policy and will continue to manage my office with an open door policy.
Thank you so much. Ms. Edwards, same question, 90 seconds.
All right, thank you. So I have been an activist for the past 20 years. I'm still active in various community organizations, to name several. For example, the Parent Teacher Student Association for a couple years. I've also been involved with community, directly with community at an early adult age in the housing community of Williams Delight. I've served where my mom, especially on the tenant council, seeing the importance of reaching to the community members and feeling the need to continue connecting with the people. I've done so. Gone to college, obtained my degrees, and knowing what's required as far as the knowledge and how I could apply those skills are very important. I've been in the Virgin Islands National Guard. Again, it's something to serve. It's an area of service. So I do know that I have been in tune with the community. I've been in and still is a part of the St. Croix Council of Elders. I'm currently actually working with children because in the past I've worked at the Boys and Girls Club. So knowing the connection with the community is very important, and being involved is an asset, I feel.
Thank you so much. Mr. James.
Greetings to the people of the Virgin Islands. Once again, my name is Javan James Sr. I am the son of Marilyn Martin James and Jonathan E. James Sr. My mom is an educator. She has been teaching for about 35 years. My father was very involved in politics in the U.S. Virgin Islands, specifically the island of St. Croix. I grew up in a household which valued education. And like I said before, my dad, I had an opportunity from a very young age to rub shoulders with the heavy hitters as far as politics. So my father's friends became my friends. And growing up, we never had babysitters. So everywhere my father went, I was right there listening to all the political conversations. As far as my education, I attended the Purby Lawson Elementary School, the Elena L. Christian Junior High School, and last but not least, the St. Croix Educational Complex. From there, I went on to work in the refinery. When most of my friends went to college, I went to study career and technical education. I became a certified operator in the refinery. From there, I went on to the Air Force. And my best experience that prepared me for this job is working in the office of Senator Novelli Francis Jr. I worked with him in the 31st and 32nd Legislature of the Virgin Islands as an administrative assistant, and I went on to seek a seat in the 33rd, 34th, and now in the 35th Legislature of the Virgin Islands. So I have been able to cross the aisles and build consensus with my colleagues to get meaningful legislation passed, and I look forward to serving in the 35th Legislature of the Virgin Islands. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's now talk about your vision for the Virgin Islands. 2027 will mark the 100th anniversary of American citizenship for Virgin Islanders and 110 years since purchase of Denmark. The question is, what is your vision with respect to self-governance for the U.S. Virgin Islands, and what role do you intend to play, if any? But please note that self-governance does not necessarily imply independence. Ms. Edwards.
Okay, thank you for the question. For the many years that we have been under the United States, I do feel it is time as residents to see that we have to grow up. And growing up is you have to be responsible for your food. We have to put ourselves in a position that we're able to grow food, feed ourselves. We have to put ourselves in a position where, even for the quick example of processing food, have a plant where we will be able to process our food. Begin or continue building relationships with neighboring islands. That would show a sense of being mature, I call it, to put us in a better position to be more self-sufficient.
Thank you. Mr. James. Want me to repeat it?
No, my name is Javan James once again. As far as self-governance, when I hear about government and leadership, I think about economics and finance. We must admit that we have pros and cons being under the United States flag. However, if we decide to go in the direction of being independent, we have to get serious as far as economics. We have to understand that if we're no longer going to be under the United States flag, we have to build relationships with our sister islands, as far as the Eastern Caribbean and Puerto Rico and what have you, to make sure that when we do branch off, that we can be able to sustain economically. We have to build relationships as far as trade and barter. As you know, we have a big port down here on St. Croix and one on St. Thomas as well. So we have to make sure we have goods coming in and out, imports and exports. So before we can even reach in that direction, we have to have a roadmap for the next 100 years as far as how we're going to be self-sustaining as far as economics. As far as getting it done, of course, we have to lobby Congress, and that would take a Constitution Convention. We try to have one coming up in the next ballot as far as getting the voters to decide on whether we should have a next Constitution Convention. Unfortunately, we were unable to get that done in time, but the conversation had to be had as far as what is the direction for the next 100 years, not just for tomorrow, but the next 100 years. And once we get that Constitution Convention, then we can lobby Congress and make our decision from there.
Thank you so much. Mr. Johnson.
Go ahead and repeat the question.
Okay. What is your vision with respect to self-governance for the U.S. Virgin Islands, and what role do you intend to play, if any? Please note that self-governance does not necessarily imply independence.
Oh, thanks for that. My role in self-government have been somewhat, I've already been acting in that capacity as far as I'm concerned, in making sure that projects that we put in place are completed. We have an infrastructure problem where we have dollars, and you're talking about being self-governing. There's so many conditions on the money that we receive from Congress, and those type of conditions needs to free up more so that the people could choose more how to spend that money. It is what it is. We're under the United States flag. However, the conditions sometimes limit us, slow us down from moving forward. When you look at the amount of money that we receive from those hurricanes, but yet we haven't moved forward with all of those billions of dollars. So our self-government has to be making sure that we put the right people in place, from senators right down to commissioner to governors, and always select the person who can get the job done, because the money is here for us and we should be moving much faster, and we should be more farther ahead of our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean. We must start looking at planting, feeding ourselves. If we continue waiting for everything coming from the outside, we definitely could be in some problem in the next 100 years. So I definitely seeing us as leaders being able to try to make sure that we do the things that we need to do to sustain ourselves inside.
Thank you so much. Moral and ethical behavior. To what extent should moral or ethical issues in the private life of political candidates be taken into account by voters making their choices, and why? Mr. James.
Well, first off, every candidate has to go through a screening at the Board of Elections to find out if they have a criminal record or what have you. So once you get through that process, of course, individuals probably did things in the past and probably got away with it. But it's up to the community to bring those things forward. We are a small community, so if we know of individuals who have a moral issue, then we should challenge it. But as far as what that person brings to the table, I think we should be able to read an individual and know when they're genuine or not when they vie for position, study their background, study their body language. But as far as ethics, once you get in, I think that's the easiest part, because you're live on camera. Individuals get to see you operate and how you behave and the decisions that you make, whether they're in the best interest of the people of the Virgin Islands. But as far as selecting the people, once you go through the screening process at the Board of Elections and you have no criminal record or crime of moral turpitude, and you meet the other requirements, then you're on to be selected as a candidate. But as far as taking it seriously, I think every individual should put a microscope under every candidate and find out what they have been doing prior to vying for a position, whether it's the Board of Elections, the Board of Education, the Senate, governor, lieutenant governor, congresswoman, or whoever it should be. So I take it very seriously, and Senator Javan James.
Thank you so much. Mr. Johnson.
Moral and ethical conduct is very important, and it's important for young people. Sometimes you might not think that you're going to strive for a political position or a particular job. So it's important as you're growing up. The things that you do today will reflect on you tomorrow. So it's important that you live that proper life, do the things that right, always be willing to share and help someone. Today's problem is your problem tomorrow. According to how you live your life, the things that you have done, the behavior out in the community, as my colleague said, it's a very small community. So people see, they hear, and I leave that to the voters to decide if that person has that moral and ethical conduct to vote on them. And the voters has to be very knowledgeable of who they're voting for, and make sure that you pick candidates that you know is going to respect the position that they are vying for. So it's important, it's very important that you, as a young person, if you're inspiring to be somebody, that you do the things that's best and always walk with your head up high.
Thank you so much. Ms. Edwards.
Thank you for that question. I do agree as far as being a reflection of who you are in the community, in that what you do out there, and people will see you in that current state. So you are expected to do the same or be of that same behavior when you go into the legislature. Regarding the screening process, yes, I do agree the Board of Elections have us go through that, but the community especially should watch us, should see what we are doing, what we have been doing in the community, and therefore use that as a signal to say, okay, well, this is the candidate I want to represent me because of that person's moral and ethical behavior.
Thank you so much. Major concerns. In a recent poll of the electorate in 2022, voters identified 4 areas of major concern as being education, crime, health, and WAPA. Let's look at each one separately and address what your responses would be for these matters if elected to the 35th legislature. With respect to education, cited by voters as one of 4 major concerns, what do you see as the primary challenges facing education today? And what would be your strategies for addressing them as a senator in the 35th legislature? You have 90 seconds. Mr. Johnson.
Well, starting out with education, I was not one of them fortunate to be in the 33rd legislature. And selecting a strong commissioner plays a key role. And I looked at those interviews of that commissioner passed, and I look at what happened and transpired. And if I was someone that was to vote on her, I would not have voted at that time. Mm-hmm. It's not left just to the commissioner. Senators have to make sure that we put the funding that's necessary for education to make sure that it's in proper place, the physical building. Our children are in schools. Some of the schools are older than I am. The infrastructure, the learning environment, we must address them. There's opportunities there. The money is there for us to build these schools, build them fast, because those environments are conducive to the children them learning. And our children walking in these type of infrastructure rundown, it really bears for them to not pay attention and stay focused.
Thank you so much. Ms. Edwards.
Thank you again for the question. As it relates to what can be done, definitely we need to give the Board of Education full authority to manage the Department of Education. They will be the ones who will be hiring the commissioner, the principal, assistant principal, or what have you. They also manage the funds that come in, and to ensure that the funds trickle down to the classroom. I think we have to take away the politics from education, because at the end of the line is our children are the ones who are affected, and we can do better by giving the Board of Education full authority to properly manage Department of Education, as I said. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. James.
Javan James, number 18 on the ballot. It is very important as we vote for senators, we vote for the governor, lieutenant governor, and the delegate to Congress and the senator at large, that we pay attention to those who are vying for a position on the Board of Education. The Board of Education has a lot of say in certain things based on the Virgin Islands Code when it comes to curriculum and what have you. But as far as the executive branch, who is tasked with the responsibility of executing the laws of the government of the Virgin Islands, it just boils down to competency and accountability of the head of government for the executive branch, which is the governor of the Virgin Islands. And of course, the legislature of the Virgin Islands has an opportunity or the responsibility to provide oversight. And I must admit that the legislature has been calling the Department of Education into those hearings, but unfortunately, we haven't had much success because they turned into one big tra-la-la. But moving forward, we definitely need to have more hearings with the Department of Education, bringing them in and focusing on important issues as far as spending of the dollars and infrastructure. As far as Virgin Islands history, I'm hoping and praying that Dr. Larson, along with other members of the Board of Education, work with the Department of Education to implement a new curriculum in place so our Virgin Islanders, our young Virgin Islanders, can walk with pride as they learn about their true and rich Virgin Islands history, So we won't see this nonsense that we have today with individuals fighting and having an issue with their self-identity. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much. With respect to health, cited by voters as one of the top 4 major concerns, many leave the territory in search of health care, especially on St. Croix. What do you see as the primary challenges regarding health care, and what would be your strategies for addressing them as a senator in the 35th legislature? You have 90 seconds. Ms. Edwards.
Okay, definitely. I would tie this now to structuring the legislature. The question is why? We don't have enough accountability where our senators are responsible for oversight over a particular department, and health is very crucial. So knowing that there will be an at-large senator, for example, responsible for health, we can clearly hold that person accountable to ensure that we have suitable health care in the Virgin Islands, so that our people won't have to be fearful of staying here because of health concerns. So reapportioning the legislature and having a large senator responsible for that department will help us have a better accountability to ensure our health system is adequate for us. So I would use reapportioning.
Thank you so much. Mr. James.
Well, Senator Javan James, number 18 on the ballot. The way how the legislature is structured currently, when we have a chair from the District of St. Croix, most likely the vice chair is from the District of St. Thomas. So we have a balance between both districts as far as the needs of those islands. As far as the Department of Health and the Wangari Fleury Hospital and the Roy Lester Snyder Hospital, I must admit that the legislature of the Virgin Islands, ever since I became a senator, we have been giving them all the funds that they have requested. I just personally feel what we need to do is focus more on upgrading the pay for the nurses so we can have them stay. We had the issue with Pafford, and we saw where the nurses who came in, they were treated way better than the nurses that we have here. And we have to take care of our very own, because we have some very hard working nurses who are qualified and they deserve the same treatment as pay as those as Pafford. As far as laws, I don't really see a need for laws. We have much laws for our health care system. We just need a board, the health board, the hospital board, to do their part. And if they have any needs, they can always call in the legislature to appropriate the necessary funding or change the laws. So we have to work together, long story short, as far as the executive branch and the legislative branch. Otherwise, it will never work. Senator Javan James, number 18 on the ballot.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Again, I keep continue saying this, and it's right there to be seen. The opportunities are there for us. We have Wang Louis North, especially on the island of St. Croix, that have been sitting there for quite some time. So it boils back down to our infrastructure. Yes, at some point we need staff and we need people. We need compatible people. Look at our registry for cancer. This thing have never been put in place. That's something I definitely want to take a lot of vision, a lot of looking at to make sure that it's put in place. Every time someone from this territory have to leave to go abroad, you find out that they had cancer. We're not doing a good job with registering what some of the ailments that's real, coming to be pretty much a pandemic in our islands. You look at the amount of folks. I traveled to the mainland about a week ago and ran into 2 family members that I haven't seen for years, a mother and her daughter. And when I asked them what caused them to move to Florida, both had cancer and had to leave for treatment. So if we start doing this registry, finding out what's causing it, then we can start taking action. If it's a refinery that's causing it, if it's the Diageo that's causing it, whatever is creating that problem, and finding out where most of our cancer patients reside, then we could start pinpointing to make sure that life can be better for our people in this territory.
Thank you so much. Yes, you had a rebuttal?
Yes. Just wanted to add to that. When we allow our children to see that they are important and there is a need in our community to have healthy people, then definitely encourage them to go in that field of study. If it's to become a nurse, if it's to become a doctor or what have you, we have to tie that to education. And people will value themselves and saying, you know what, I am needed in my community, so we need to build that for to having our children see their need to be involved in that health area.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I would like to add to that. Javan James, once again, as I mentioned earlier with staffing, it boils down to competency. We have a problem with it. The U.S. mainland, they have more attractive salaries and incentives, and we see many times, even in the Department of Education, where we lose our best and brightest to the United States mainland, where they have competitive salaries. So once we have our doctors and our nurses being up to par, then they will stay here. We have to stop the brain drain, because without workforce, we cannot get the mission accomplished. So Senator Javan James.
Thank you so much. With respect to crime cited by voters as one of the top 4 major concerns, what do you see as the challenges, and what would be your strategies for addressing them as a senator in the 35th legislature? You have 90 seconds, and that's Mr. James.
Yes, as far as crime, if you watch the recent budget hearings in the Committee on Finance, we saw where there's a serious issue with workforce in the Virgin Islands Police Department. A lot of individuals are either leaving, they're on leave, or individuals just don't want to become policemen and women. So I asked most of the agencies, what are they doing to attract individuals? They need individuals who have sign-on bonuses to attract these younger ones or the older ones, or whatever the case may be. But as far as the camera systems, the legislature of the Virgin Islands did their due diligence to appropriate funds to get the camera systems. We are working on the RFID license plates, the spot shutter, and many other devices to get up to the time as far as electronics and digitizing. But as far as workforce is our biggest issue, because right now we're spending a lot of money on overtime, and that money can be used to put in to fill in those vacancies. But unfortunately, individuals do not want to become policemen, and we need police presence. If we have police presence, most individuals will think twice about doing certain things in the community. But until then, we have to depend on cameras. Senator Javan James, number 18 on the ballot.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Well, I start out by saying we must have the police department to gain confidence from the citizens. Right now, all the crimes that are happening, somebody out there know what happened. Nobody is willing to come to testify. Nobody is willing to come forward because they don't have the trust in our police department. But when you take it to another notch, we must invest even more money. And I do agree with my colleague here that we have put the money to get these cameras, but we have to invest more money into lighting up this entire territory, this entire island with cameras. When I spoke to the past commissioner, he said that the shot spotters wasn't sufficient. And again, we gave more money to that. But you could go to the biggest state, the biggest city, and every block you'll see a camera. We're gonna have to rely on technology in order to solve crimes. And once we can get our technology up to speed to help us solve crime, hopefully we'll put a nip in the butt with that, because it's a small group that continues torturing the people of this territory. So as an elected official in the 35th, I definitely will be trying to find more funding to make sure that we could put cameras, and cameras that are workable to identify license plate readers, start having cameras to traffic light. People are driving reckless today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Ms. Edwards.
Okay, thank you for the question. I do agree with the 2 candidates here as it relates to the camera situation, where I would also, well, in addition to that, we need to refocus who's committing these crimes and why. If we tend to neglect the fact that there aren't adequate programs for our youths. Now, this may be before my time, but I heard about the Youth Commission, and actually it may not be before my time. But when there were like Youth Commission activities in the housing community, for example, at least I was able to participate, where the youths were engaged in learning skills and being a part of a community. How can I be a steward for my community? We are lacking a lot of programs for our youth people. We need to have programs that will have them prepared for being good community members. So if we neglect on that key area, our children, providing youth programs, then this is what's going to happen. More crimes are going to take place. Why are we hating each other? The children have to recognize that they're hating themselves when they commit crimes against each other. So I just wanted to add that to addition to what our my co-candidates said.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate what Shalima said there about programs, and we must invest more into our nonprofit organization because they're the one that fill that gap. You're talking about Boy Scout, Boys Club, Girl Scout. These type of programs, 4-H programs, these programs have died down drastically. So our children are idle many times, and idle mind dwindle in crime. So we must find funding to infuse in these nonprofit organizations who are the person that hold the balance when that family is working a second job. Kids have nothing to do, no place to go. So I definitely support having those type of programs, really getting some more funding.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I'd like to add to that, Senator Javan James once again, and that is why I agree with both of them, and that is why as a sitting senator in the 33rd and 34th Legislature of the Virgin Islands, I was able to bring forward legislation with the support of my colleagues for $200,000 to renovate the Police Athletic League facility in Estate Wim. We have been able to get $1.1 million for the car track, $2.1 million for a cricket field. We have been working with the Soccer Association and the VI Sports Commission and other recreational entities and nonprofits to make sure that we have things for our children to do. So in addition to upgrading or improving our workforce for the police department and using technology, we have to make sure that we have things for our youth to do and engage, whether it's a C-Tech program or any kind of training. So we have to give funding, and that's why right now we're doing the budget wrap-up. So as I leave here, I'm going to budget wrap-up to make sure that we put the necessary funding in there for the nonprofit organizations to do things that the government cannot do.
Thank you
Senator
so
Javan
much.
James.
Thank you so much. Sexual assault against our children is a concern in our community. Recent disclosure assaults against 12 schoolboys by a teacher is shocking, and the community was rightly outraged. But girls are raped and assaulted too. How can you, as a senator, protect our boys and girls from sexual assaults by adults? So, I will ask Miss Edwards. Miss Edwards, you have 60 seconds.
Thank you for the question. Very interesting. How do we protect our young people from adults? Well, definitely we need to know who these perpetrators are. So if there's legislation that's needed before anyone could be employed relating to where children are, then that needs to get done. I want to add, though, sometimes we tend to neglect, probably it's happening at home too, and it may be happening in the church or what have you. So I think some type of educating on an ongoing effort to let the children know, let the parents know what's good touch, what's bad touch, where to go if you are being assaulted is very important. So advocacy is very important. So somehow, as people, we need to make sure that we protect our children wherever they are.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Franklin.
Very, very good and difficult question. Everything cannot be legislative. Parents, family members, the community have to get involved if we're going to nip it in the bud. Many times when you speak about that teacher, there's information of folks knowing that this had occurred way long ago. There's some law that just have been passed to make sure that you hold those who knew and didn't bring it forward to be accountable and face judgment too. So it's not always going to be just legislation all the time that's going to solve these problems, but the community, the family members, people educating their children, again, as I would call it my colleague to my left here say, letting children know what's good touch, what's bad touch. So it starts at home, making sure your children know so that they can report it to you, and then you as the adult bring it to the authorities right away.
Thank you. Mr. James?
Yes, Senator Javan James, number 18 on the ballot. I have proposed and successfully passed 4 pieces of legislation ever since sitting in the 33rd and 34th Legislature of the Virgin Islands when it comes to sexual abuse. One of the first is ending child marriage in the Virgin Islands. People do not know, but individuals use that as a loophole to avoid going to jail. And in return, if they know their family member is going to press charge or whatever, they would try to buy out the mom or dad to encourage them to have the child marry them. I also passed legislation about knowledge of sexual abuse of a minor. I have passed legislation regarding neglect of a minor, child abuse, child neglect, and all those legislations were successfully passed. In addition to that, though, our guidance counselors should be more open and have an open policy in the schools where the students feel comfortable in confiding in the guidance counselor, and then from there that information can go to the authorities.
Thank you so much. I have to go to the next question.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
With respect to WAPA as one of the 4 top concerns cited by voters, what do you see as the major challenges of WAPA? And what would be your strategies for addressing them as a senator in the 35th legislature? 90 seconds. Mr. Johnson.
WAPA, the elephant in the room that has really created just a destruction in this territory. Many businesses have closed because of WAPA. High power bill, high utility costs. WAPA really starts with the management. Bad management, bad managerial skill, not enough. When you look at the IG report and you see what kind of bad investment that WAPA have made, people need to be held accountable. Folks, when $2 million is going to disappear, we have to find out where our money is being spent. When you look at some of the new technology that WAPA decided to bring on board, that was supposed to be efficient and bring down the cost of power, didn't work. We're going to definitely have to tap into a lot of the resources and go solar. If we don't start utilizing the sun, the wind, and the energy that we have around us, these bills will continue skyrocketing, and it's going to cost the people of this territory a lot. So I definitely look forward in Steam Whip, we could have new initiative with more solar paneling, make it more affordable to the average person, and some wind turbines.
Thank you so much. Ms. Edwards.
It's very interesting, but it's very, very good that candidate Johnson mentioned that, because one of the things that I've advocated is using our natural resources. And if WAPA is the main source for us to get electricity, then we have to see other ways that we could receive such resources. And Senator Johnson mentioned about the solar panel and the wind turbine. I also do agree with that wholeheartedly. We may need to look further as it relates to, is solar panel the best? Because there are some concerns about the environmental issue if it gets damaged. But we have to look again for other ways in which WAPA could help in reducing the cost of living here in the Virgin Islands. So researching is very important, and if you elect me, definitely I will have people who will be researching alternative energy more.
Thank you so much. Mr. James.
Yes, Javan James, number 18 on the ballot. As a member of the 33rd and 34th Legislature of the Virgin Islands, my colleagues and I passed many legislation to hold WAPA accountable, and of course, we saw some pushback from the administration. However, one of the things that we really need to focus on is what hurts individuals' pockets, and that is the base rate. And the governor of the Virgin Islands need to revisit the Vital deal to find out how we can renegotiate or amend that deal, because it's affecting the base rate. You know, when we did that deal, it increased the base rate, and now the individuals, the ratepayers, have to pay for that. But in the long term, what we have to do is make sure that we maintain competent people to serve on the WAPA Governing Authority Board, who makes a decision to hold the CEO accountable. And then from there, we need to make sure that we have adequate training for our linemen and other individuals who work at the authority. And long story short, in the long term, we need to make sure that the Democratic Party, who has been in control for all these years, put a blueprint, a roadmap in place. So when governors comes in, they follow that blueprint to make sure that the WAPA Governing Authority Board and the leadership are held accountable when it comes to their finances and the overall plan for infrastructure in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I'm hoping that one of these days that we can have 2 plants on the island of St. Croix. So when one trips, the other one kicks in. And the same thing, one can be on St. John and one on St. Thomas. So when one unit trip, the other one kicks in. If not, we're going to continue to have power outages because it's inevitable.
Thank you so much. For the first time in about 25 years, GRS was not identified as a major concern. What is your understanding of why this is so, and what lessons can we learn about how this came to be so? You have 60 seconds. And Ms. Edwards.
I will admit more information is needed as to why that occurred, why where the GRS is where it's at, and why a lot of retirees are not receiving what they should have been receiving years ago. So I will say that if there are adequate funds that should be tied to paying the employees when they retire, then that needs to be addressed. If the funds are not being utilized in a way where it's going someplace else, then it's going to continue to affect the retirees. But again, I would say that I need more research as to how it started and how to end this right now, because they're going to be bleeding and they're not receiving the funds that they're supposed to be receiving as retirees.
Thank you so much. Mr. James.
Yes, Senator Javan James, number 18 on the ballot. I'm proud to sit here as a member of the 33rd and the 34th Legislature of the Virgin Islands, who have been involved heavily in the conversation when it came to our recent legislation that was passed and now signed into law. That is not going to save GRS, but it's going to stop the bleeding. However, one of the main challenges and the elephant in the room when it comes to GRS is the 9 unfunded mandates. Recently, in the past legislatures, we had individuals who passed feel-good legislation, and we didn't have the adequate amount of funds to fund that in the long term. And we have to make the hard decisions at some point. If not, when we continue to put these band-aids, of course, we're going to kick the can down the road. But as far as a funding source, I support the implementation of the adult recreational cannabis legislation. Hopefully, that will come forward. We can use that as a dedicated funding source to go straight to GRS. And I am willing to support any measure that is a dedicated funding source to fund GRS.
Thank you so much. Mr. Franklin.
Thank you for that question. And I think I started out saying that I am not on the finance committee, but I make sure that I was on the subcommittee, and I took part in the piece of legislation that my colleague spoke about, that it's not a savior, but it's stabilized. It's basically as simple as you could look at it, just consolidating and utilizing it. But that piece of measure that was passed was so important the way it was passed. Every dime that is saved, that is made, will go directly to GERS and no place else but GERS. So I was proud to be a part of the 34th legislature and making sure that we did everything that we could in our power to stabilize WAPA. There's a lot of other adjustments that have been made with folks that 20-year retirement went to 25. Some of them had ages put involved. So there's been a lot of adjustment that have been made and will be continue to be made to save GRS and stabilize it. And I'll continue supporting those initiatives.
Thank you so much. Let's talk about growing the economy. While tourism is the backbone of our economy, the majority of the electorate do not work in that industry. Many work in government, but that does little to bring in new dollars. So what's left is the private sector. What have you done or plan to do as a senator to grow and support the private sector and to encourage more locals to become successful in the private sector? You have 60 seconds. Mr. James.
Well, thank you for placing that on the record. Economic development is very important. I've been championing and working diligently with Executive Director Carlton Dow to make sure that that hotel project on the island of St. Croix comes into fruition, because it's a part of my vision for sports tourism. Earlier, I made mention of the $2.1 million for the cricket field, in which I played a major role in getting that sponsored. I mentioned the $1.1 million for the car track. Right now, I'm currently sitting on millions of dollars of legislation when it comes to the St. Croix horse track. I was able to get $8 million in addition to what we have there to finish the Party Joseph Stadium. But to have true sports tourism, we have to make sure that we have hotel development on the island of St. Croix, because the airlines are not going to come here if we don't have enough places to put individuals to stay. So I'm pushing for hotel development on the island of St. Croix. In addition to that, I have plenty more legislation that will promote true and positive economic development for St. Croix.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards.
Okay, thank you for the question. I do feel that the government is too top heavy. I say that to say many people may want to just go and work, become an employee at the government. However, they're lacking, I feel, their foresight in becoming entrepreneurs. When we let our young people especially know that, hey, you can create a business. This is your interest, then go for it. We need to be sensitive to our local businesses, provide incentives, and not put measures in place that's going to cause them to end their business in a matter of 2-3 years. So we have to encourage more benefits to local entrepreneurs, especially encourage our young people to go in that area of interest.
Thank you so much. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you very much for that question. And your question had a point there that's very important. Most of our people are not involved in the tourism industry. And if we learn anything, we must learn from the pandemic. Because if a next pandemic hit, it slows down that tourism industry that we rely on. Mm-hmm. We must pay very close attention to agriculture, farming, and feeding ourselves. If we can cut down on the amount of food that we continuously importing, we'll be in a very good place. My experience in farming come back from walking to the prison, where for 7 months straight, we supplied Pueblo with cucumber, tomato, and zucchini. 1,000 pounds of tomato on Monday, 1,000 pounds of zucchini on Wednesday, 1,000 pounds of tomato on Friday. And that went on for 7 months straight. So I know that we can supply ourselves with a lot of these 6 months product that we don't have to continue shipping in.
Thank you so much. I have to go on to the next question. The pandemic has shown us that need to diversify our economy and supplement our dependence on tourism. What other opportunities do you see besides tourism and alcohol for growing and diversifying our economy? And what other challenges to make them a reality? Mr. Johnson.
I think I just ended my last.
Yeah, you did.
I probably saw your paper.
Yeah, you did.
But I ended off the previous question with speaking about looking into agriculture.
Right.
And I do believe that wholeheartedly we definitely need to really take it more serious. Mm-hmm. The legislature, I think it was the 33rd legislature, my colleague said, increase the budget for agriculture at a percent or X amount of percent from the budget. But we have yet to see the fruits of that labor. But we must look at agriculture as an alternative to feed ourselves so we don't have to rely on these ships with all of this food coming in. If we do that, if and when a next pandemic do hit, we'll be in a better place.
Thank you so much. Ms. Edwards.
Yes, and tying into agriculture, definitely. Earlier I mentioned about processing plants. So we have some individuals in our community. They're great when it comes to making snacks, mango. You're using a raw fruit, for example, and the value added is that end product would be chips, it could be jams, it could, we have gooseberries too, and things like that. So using what is naturally here, we could find ways to bring in income. So we could export, so it's not just waiting for tourists to come here. We could start exporting these products.
Thank you. Mr. James.
Yes, Senator Javan James, number 18 on the ballot. The governor of the Virgin Islands is the chief negotiator for the government of the Virgin Islands. He has that power to sit down with hotel developers, sit down with big companies and attract them and bring them to the Virgin Islands. I'm hoping, I'm praying though, that while we work on bringing individuals here to diversify our economy, that we focus on our infrastructure, because we need to get our roads up and running, we need to get our lights, and we need to challenge WAPA, because the cost of doing business in the Virgin Islands is very expensive. So if we can work on reducing the base rate for the Water and Power Authority, the cost of doing business in the territory will go down. So I'm all for economic development, but we still have some underlying issues that we have to fix if we want to really see long-term effects of diversifying our economy. And I want to say thank you to the University of the Virgin Islands and the Small Business Development Center, because they have a lot of programs to help companies or businesses in the initial phases or stages to give them the necessary funding and resources that they need to be successful.
Thank you so much. We have time for each candidate to expand on any one topic of choice for 60 seconds before we move to the closing statements. Let's start with Javan James.
Yes, Senator Javan James, number 18 on the ballot. With everything that was said today, the most important thing is valuing the importance of education. Like I made mention earlier, my mom is an educator. She has been teaching for over 35 years. Growing up in that household, I knew the importance of reading the daily news, reading the Avis, and just being sharp. So I'm encouraging the young Virgin Islanders to please value the education, and not necessarily going to college if you don't want to choose that route, but learn a trade, learn a skill. And at the end of the day, as a senator, in the legislature of the Virgin Islands. I will continue to do my due diligence as a member of the Committee on Finance to make sure that we appropriate the necessary funding to create that learning and safe environment for our youth. Because how I see it is, if we plant the seed, which is the youth, and we nurture it and we make sure that it grows successfully, then we will not have the issues that we have today. Education, education, education.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards.
Well, I have to agree. That is one of the top ones for me, education. And if a community don't know themselves, then they will continue to look elsewhere in solving the problems. We have the capacity because we live here. We know what the problems are, and we can fix the problems together. So getting us to the right base, know yourself, know the greatness that you have. You will love each other, you won't want to destroy each other. You would want to build the community. So that is why I would say education is the top priority, and funding that's there, let it trickle down to the classroom. Let it reach to the students. Let it reach to the public in knowing that, hey, we can educate ourselves, know ourselves of our history and our greatness, because that is key.
Thank you so much. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you very much for that question, and I will ask the chicken or the egg. But there are 4 major problems that the Virgin Islands have that we have had from the time I'm a little boy, and we spoke about them today. We talk about crime, we talk about WAPA, we talk about education, and we talk about our healthcare and facilities. And if we don't make a dent into these 4 major problems, the Virgin Islands will be in a very sad place. We must do better in those 4 areas in order to compete in the tourism industry and to live a better life right here in our territory. So it's about us looking out for us and making sure that we do these 4 projects that are very sincere to the Virgin Islands moving forward.
Thank you so much. Now, candidates, we have 60 seconds. You will have 60 seconds each for a closing statement, starting with Mr. Johnson.
Well, I would like to start off by saying thank you very much to WTJX and the League of Women Voters for having this forum. It's been a pleasure being here today with the 2 candidates, colleague and candidates. And I must say, it's been a very nice experience thus far for me in this 34th legislature. Had some challenges, but it doesn't stop me from trying to make sure that I provide opportunities and make a better Virgin Islands. My name is Franklin D. Johnson, number 9 on your ballot, independent candidate, número 9 en su papeleta. Gracias por su confianza en tu vota.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards.
Yes, thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to let the public know some of the questions that were asked and my response to those questions. I am definitely a community person. I will definitely keep in touch with the people. And you, the people, you have the power. Don't just expect me to just go in there and do it alone. No, I expect to engage. You engage me, go out to the community, have meetings, town hall meetings. I am that person. Please remember, if you have not registered yet, please register before it's too late and vote for number 8. You can find me on Facebook or on YouTube, Shalima Edwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. James.
Thank you once again to WTJX and the League of Women Voters for having us here today. Once again, number 18 on the ballot, I'm humbly asking for your vote and support as I vie for a position in the 35th Legislature of the Virgin Islands. You can call my office at 340-712-2246 if you have any questions or concerns. You can follow me on Facebook at Senator Javan James. That's Senator Javan James. I will be glad to help you, and if I'm not able to pick up the phone, someone in my office will definitely help you. My role is simple: legislation, providing oversight, and appropriating funds. And I've been doing just that with the support of my colleagues. And there's no I in the Senate. It's about building consensus, and I've been able to do so. And because I've been able to build consensus, that is the reason why I'm able to get legislation passed. So I will continue to do my due diligence and humbly serve the people of the U.S. Virgin Islands. And once again, thank you to WTJX and the League of Women Voters. God bless.
Thank you, candidates, and thank you, WTJX-TV and staff for today's program. The League of Women Voters hopes this program was helped with your understanding of the candidates, and so doing will inform your vote in November. The League reminds you that your vote determines the future of the Virgin Islands. Every vote does count. During elections, we often see the individual who barely makes the cut because a few more people did vote, or one who barely loses and wishes if only a few more persons had voted. So let your voice be heard by your vote. It's your right. Take it. Thank you for watching. I am Annette Scott for the League of Women Voters of the Virgin Islands, saying vote early or vote in November, but vote.